Hello again, everyone. Dave Benson here, Senior Advisor for Threat Mitigation and Global Operations at the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the potential roles and responsibilities that security professionals should be playing as part of their comprehensive violence prevention programs. So let's get started. As we often say at the center, we break down violence prevention into three main areas: prevention or readiness, response, or recovery. As far as prevention goes, the first thing that a security professional or security organization should be thinking about doing is conducting a comprehensive threat assessment, violence assessment, if you will. Some folks do a risk assessment to determine what your vulnerabilities are within the organization. And there should be an initial one and then periodically done from then on throughout the life of the organization, because circumstances and things certainly change as your program will develop and mature. And so another important point to keep in mind is that you want to look at this assessment, the scope, from an organizational as well as a stakeholder or employee perspective. You've got to have both to get a good understanding of what's going on within your organization. And we also include things like culture, demographics, location. All those things are factored into that initial and recurring assessment to determine your vulnerabilities and then what potential intervention strategies you might have to put in place. Secondly, the three policy and procedure protocols that we talk about quite a bit at the center: the standalone workplace violence prevention program policy, the governance document, and then the active assailant protocols are all extremely important pieces that security professionals should be all over as to their involvement in the program. So as far as a standalone workplace violence prevention intervention policy is concerned, we need to clearly identify what concerning behaviors are and the consequences of noncompliance. But as a reminder, we don't talk about things such as zero tolerance. We talk it in terms of no threat, no violence, and a balanced, empathic approach to violence prevention. Likewise, we want to identify the roles and responsibilities of all workplace parties or within your group or your team, and certainly security professionals. They bring a lot to the table. They normally have liaison with local law enforcement. They are usually the end users of reporters for crime or other security violations within the organization. So that's a critical component, all of which has to be built in that. And then every section of the team needs to identify what their roles and responsibilities are. Another important piece is to have, number one, multiple avenues of reporting, to include anonymous reporting, but also how to report, who to report it to, when to report, and what the consequences are when it's reported from an organizational perspective. And then please don't forget to ensure that your policies and procedures also incorporate the possibility of domestic and intimate partner violence. From a response standpoint, it's extremely important, because as good as our prevention or our readiness components are, it's entirely likely that despite our efforts, we're still going to have an event. So therefore, response strategies are critical, and obviously security professionals should and often do take a lead role in that. And so things like summoning assistance, how to do that, who the players are, what the internal and the external response strategies might be to various types of security incidents, not the least of which an active assailant protocol. Encouraging your folks to report concerning behavior and potential violent acts instead of being heroic and trying to break it up themselves. There's no substitute for identifying the threat, getting themselves and others out of harm's way, and let the response strategies take over. What is your workplace violence investigation protocol? I'm very much aware that many organizations have a 2 or 3-pronged investigative approach depending on the nature of the investigation. What I'm suggesting is you need to certainly from a violence prevention standpoint, have that clearly nailed down on who's taking the lead on that, or if you're sharing the responsibility so we don't have a duplication of efforts. And then from a security perspective, make sure that the tiered training, workplace violence prevention, intervention, awareness training for the general population, for managers and supervisors, and then that multidisciplinary threat management team, and yes, even for the executives, has a very important readiness and response component in there, which often falls to the security folks. The final piece, which sometimes is not thought of from a security standpoint, is the recovery piece. What happens after you've had an event? Sometimes we rely on business continuity or business resilience to do that. What I'm suggesting is there's always a security response component with that. You're always trying to keep the enterprise safe and secure. And so make sure security professionals, you have a good handle on what that is. What's the measures to summon assistance? Because remember, that's one of our core competencies, knowing what resources from law enforcement and security to get and who's going to respond and how they're going to respond. But also what happens when people refuse to comply with rules and regulations, safe terminations. Make sure that the security professionals are all over those protocols as well, because those of you that have been with me for a while know I don't know what a risky termination is. They all have potential. So we have to have a potential security component with that. And developing specialized safety plans for potential targets of violence, not just intimate partner and domestic, although clearly that's more often the case. But if we have somebody that's under threat for whatever reason, what safety plans, what intervention strategies are we going to put in place to recognize that? So that we have an entire comprehensive approach to readiness, response, and recovery from a security professional perspective. So in closing, while as a security professional, you or your group may not be solely responsible for the violence prevention program, and frankly, I hope you're not, because that's best handled from a multidisciplinary approach. You need to recognize what your roles is and when you need to insert yourself into all those protocols for the most effective readiness, response, and recovery for your organization. So that's it for today. I hope you found it useful. As always, please reach out to us at info@cpps.com with any questions, comments, or concerns. Until next time, Dave Benson saying, stay safe.